Picture the scene. Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. At the best table, a billionaire mogul entertains his stunning mistress. Suddenly, a woman approaches, her presence radiating an icy calm. She's elegant, poised, and 7 months pregnant. It's his wife. But she isn't here to cry or to cause a scene. She's here to execute a plan. With a single envelope slid across the table, she detonates his perfectly curated life in front of everyone. This is the story of Maya Elridge, a woman who turned devastation into a declaration of war. What happens next will leave you breathless. Stay tuned. The air in the penthouse on the 87th floor of the St. Regis Chicago was always the same, temperature-controlled, faintly scented with white tea and peonies, and silent. It was a silence that cost millions, a buffer against the clamor of the city below. For Maya Elridge, now 7 months pregnant, that silence had once felt like peace. Now it felt like a vacuum, sucking the very breath from her lungs. She traced the cool, veined marble of the kitchen island, her gaze fixed on the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights glittered like a spilled chest of jewels, a spectacle that used to thrill her. Tonight, it just looked like a million tiny, indifferent eyes. Graham Elridge, her husband, was a titan. A self-made real estate and tech mogul, he moved through the world as if he had personally laid its foundations. He was charming, impossibly handsome, and possessed a confidence so absolute it was its own form of gravity, pulling everyone and everything into his orbit. Maya had been pulled in 5 years ago, a hopeful architect, swept away by a whirlwind romance that culminated in this gilded cage. She had loved him with a fierce, all-consuming passion, believing she was the anchor to his ambitious soul. She'd put her own career on hold, a sacrifice she made willingly for their future, for the family they were building. The first crack in their perfect facade had been hairline thin, a late-night board meeting on a Friday. He'd come home smelling not of stale office coffee, but of a cloying, unfamiliar perfume, something floral and audacious. She'd dismissed it. Then came the hushed phone calls he'd take on the terrace, his back to her, his voice a low murmur that the wind snatched away. The password on his personal laptop, once shared freely, was suddenly changed. "New security protocol from IT," he'd said with an easy smile, but his eyes didn't quite meet hers. The suspicion was a slow-growing poison. Maya fought it, telling herself it was hormones, the anxiety of impending motherhood making her paranoid. Graham was a good man. He was her man. He'd gently rub her swollen feet at night, talk to her belly in a soft, silly voice, and plan their baby moon to Lake Como. How could a man who did those things be deceiving her? The truth arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet click of an email notification. Graham had left his tablet on the bedside table, unlocked. A confirmation from a high-end jewelry store, graph, had popped up. Item: a diamond tennis bracelet. Recipient: Rhea Collins. Delivery address: a luxury condo in the Gold Coast she didn't recognize. The purchase date was 2 days ago, the day he'd claimed to be in grueling, back-to-back meetings, finalizing the new Elridge Tower project. Rhea Collins. The name struck Maya with the force of a physical blow. She was a new, ferociously ambitious VP in Graham's acquisitions department. Maya had met her once at a company gala. She remembered a young woman with razor-sharp cheekbones, a predatory intelligence in her eyes, and a red dress that was an event in itself. She had watched Rhea laugh at something Graham said, her hand lingering on his arm just a fraction of a second too long. At the time, Maya had registered it as a flicker of annoyance. Now, it replayed in her mind, in high definition, a scene from a horror film, where she was the only one who didn't know the monster was already in the house. For 3 days, Maya lived with the knowledge coiling in her gut. She functioned on autopilot, smiling when Graham kissed her goodbye, discussing nursery colors, feeling the baby kick inside her, a tiny, innocent life tethered to this colossal lie. The love she felt for him didn't just vanish, it curdled. It twisted into something agonizing, a phantom limb that ached with memory. Each touch from him felt like a brand, each lie a fresh layer of suffocation. She wasn't a fool. She knew the power imbalance was a canyon. Graham had the money, the lawyers, the influence. He could paint her as an unstable, hormonal pregnant woman. He could bury her. But as she sat in the silent penthouse, the city lights mocking her, something shifted. The immense, crushing weight of her grief began to solidify. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was rage. A cold, clear, crystalline rage. He had not just cheated on her. He had gambled with their family. He had gambled with her future and the future of their child. He had done it all while looking her in the eye and telling her he loved her. The disrespect was a deeper wound than the infidelity itself. On the 4th day, she made a call, not to her mother, not to her sister, but to Delilah Monroe, the most feared divorce attorney in Chicago. Delilah was known for her discretion, her ruthlessness, and her utter lack of sentimentality. "Ms. Monroe," Maya said, her voice even, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "My name is Maya Eldridge. My husband is Graham Eldridge. I need to file for divorce, and I need to do it in a way he will never forget." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Delilah's voice, smooth as silk, sharp as glass. "Mrs. Eldridge, I understand. When a man like your husband falls, the whole city feels the tremor. Tell me, how much of a tremor did you have in mind?" Maya looked at the tablet, still open to the jewelry receipt. She did a quick search for Rhea Collins and found her public Instagram profile. Her latest post, from an hour ago, was a story. A clinking champagne flute, a perfectly manicured hand, adorned with a new, sparkling diamond tennis bracelet, and a caption, "Tonight's we won't forget." The location tag was a single word. Aurelia. Aurelia. Graham's favorite restaurant for closing deals. An exclusive, opulent place where the city's elite went to be seen. He had taken her there on their first anniversary. The tremor, Maya thought, would start tonight. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to scream. She was going to walk into that restaurant, carrying the future he had so carelessly discarded, and serve him the consequences on a silver platter. The gilded cage was about to break, and she would be the one holding the hammer. The black dress Maya chose was deceptively simple. It was a high-necked, long-sleeved sheath of soft cashmere that draped elegantly over her 7-month baby bump, a silhouette of quiet dignity. It wasn't a dress of mourning or revenge. It was armor. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, sleek chignon, and her makeup was minimal, save for a bold, blood-red lipstick. She looked in the full-length mirror, not at a heartbroken wife, but at a queen about to reclaim her throne. The reflection was of a woman she hadn't seen in years, focused, formidable, and entirely her own. Delilah Monroe had worked with breathtaking speed. A courier had delivered a thick manila envelope an hour ago. Inside were the freshly filed divorce papers, the petition for the dissolution of marriage. The top page was stark, its clinical language a brutal counterpoint to the emotional carnage it represented. Maya Eldridge, petitioner, versus Graham Eldridge, respondent. Delilah had advised her to wait, to strategize. But Maya knew that the power of this moment lay in its immediacy. It had to be a public execution of their marriage, a cauterization of the wound in front of the very person who had helped inflict it. She took a taxi, leaving her chauffeured Lexus in the garage. This was her journey alone. As the cab pulled up to Aurelia, perched atop a skyscraper in River North, she felt a tremor of fear, a final, flickering plea from the woman who still loved her husband. She silenced it. Love wouldn't protect her baby. Strength would. The maitre d', a man named Jean-Pierre, whom she knew well, greeted her with a warm smile that faltered when he saw her face. "Mrs. Elridge, what a pleasant surprise. Mr. Elridge did not say you were joining him. It's a surprise for him, too," Maya said, her voice cool and steady. "Which table are they at?" The use of "they" was deliberate. Jean-Pierre's professional mask tightened. He knew his clientele's secrets. With a brief, almost imperceptible nod of understanding, he gestured towards the corner of the dining room. "The corner booth by the window, of course. Your usual?" "Of course. Her favorite table. The one with the panoramic view of the skyline. The one he'd always reserved for their special occasions. The audacity of it stole her breath for a second, but she converted the pain into fuel. She walked through the restaurant, the low hum of conversation and the clinking of cutlery seeming to dim as she passed. She felt the stares, the curious glances. A woman so heavily pregnant, alone, walking with such unnerving purpose. And then she saw them. They were illuminated by the soft glow of a small table lamp and the glittering city behind them. Graham looked relaxed, magnetic, laughing at something Rhea was saying. Rhea was leaning forward, her expression adoring, her hand, the one with the new bracelet, resting possessively on his. They were in their own bubble, a world built on Maya's pain. As she approached, it was Rhea who saw her first. Her smile froze, a flicker of confusion turning into a flash of triumph. She likely thought Maya was there to make a scene, to cry and scream, to hand her a victory on a silver platter. Graham followed Rhea's gaze, and his face went through a rapid, devastating series of transformations. The charming smile evaporated, replaced by pure shock. The shock morphed into disbelief, then into a dark, thunderous anger as his eyes darted from Maya's face to the manila envelope in her hand. He started to rise, his mouth opening to spin a lie, to control the narrative. Maya didn't give him the chance. She reached the table and, without a word, slid the thick envelope onto the polished mahogany surface. It landed between his wine glass and Rhea's bread plate, with a soft, definitive thud. The sound was louder than a scream in the suddenly silent space around their table. "What is this, Maya?" Graham's voice was a low growl, meant to intimidate. Maya met his gaze, her own calm and unyielding. "It's your copy," she said, her voice carrying just enough for them, and perhaps the nearest tables, to hear clearly. "The original has been filed. Our lawyer, my lawyer, Delilah Monroe, sends her regards." The name hung in the air. Graham flinched. He knew who Delilah Monroe was. Every wealthy man in Chicago knew. Rhea, recovering her composure, let out a small, condescending laugh. "Are you serious? You're going to do this here? While you're pregnant? It's a little desperate, don't you think?" Maya finally turned her gaze to Rhea. She looked her up and down, a slow, dismissive appraisal that took in the expensive dress, the borrowed jewelry, the fleeting confidence. "Desperation is sleeping with a married man in the hope that you'll get his wife's seat at the table," Maya said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet each word a perfectly sharpened dart. "This is not desperation. This is a business transaction, and you, Miss Collins, are an unlisted liability that is being dealt with." Rhea's face went white with fury. She was used to being the smartest person in the room, the one with the power. In 2 sentences, Maya had reframed her from a romantic rival into a cheap corporate risk. Graham finally found his voice, laced with venom. "You've lost your mind. Get out of here, Maya. We will discuss this at home." "There is no home anymore, Graham," she replied, her voice ringing with finality. She looked from his face to her own rounded belly. "There is my home, and there is yours. The contents of that envelope will make the distinction perfectly clear. I've petitioned for exclusive use of the penthouse, effective immediately. My security is there now. Your things will be packed and sent to your office tomorrow." He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time in years. Not as an accessory, not as a gentle partner, but as an adversary, an equal. And it terrified him. "Maya, please," he began, the anger shifting to a desperate attempt at manipulation. "Don't do this. Think about the baby. That was his final, fatal mistake." Her calm broke, just for a second, revealing the raging inferno beneath. "I am only thinking about the baby," she hissed, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "I am thinking about the fact that his father was buying bracelets for his mistress with the money that should be securing his future. I am thinking that I will not raise my son in a house of lies. This," she gestured to the papers, to the entire sordid scene, "is me thinking of the baby." She held his gaze for a moment longer, letting the full weight of his loss settle upon him. He had lost his wife, his child, his home, and his carefully curated image, all in the space of 5 minutes. Without another glance at Rhea, Maya turned and walked away. Her back was straight, her steps even. She didn't look back. She could feel the eyes of the entire restaurant on her, but they didn't matter. The silence held until she was gone, and then a low murmur erupted. The tremor had begun. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she placed a hand on her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of a kick. It wasn't a kick of distress. It felt like a cheer. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, just as Delilah Monroe had predicted. Graham Elridge wasn't just a rich man. He was a brand built on the image of stability, family, and success. The Aurelia incident, whispered from table to table, was a story too juicy to contain. By the next morning, it was the lead item on every gossip blog and financial news site. Billionaire Graham Elridge served divorce papers by pregnant wife in front of alleged mistress. Graham, accustomed to controlling every narrative, was apoplectic. He was locked out of his own home, his belongings arriving at his sterile corporate office in a series of humiliating cardboard boxes. He tried to call Maya, but the number was blocked. His texts, alternating between rage-filled threats and pathetic, pleading apologies, went unanswered. He had underestimated her completely. He had mistaken her quiet nature for weakness, her love for subservience. It was the most costly miscalculation of his life. Maya, meanwhile, retreated into the fortress of the St. Regis penthouse. But it was no longer a cage. It was a war room. Delilah Monroe became her general. A formidable woman in her 50s, with eyes that missed nothing, Delilah laid out the battlefield. "He will try to crush you, Maya," Delilah said, her voice crisp as she paced the length of the living room, the city glittering behind her. "He'll use his money to drag this out. He will file motions to paint you as unstable, a gold digger, an unfit mother. He will try to bleed you dry emotionally and financially. Our job is to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless." The prenuptial agreement was Graham's first line of attack. It was an ironclad document, designed by his team of corporate sharks, intended to protect his vast fortune. It stipulated a modest, one-time payout, a fraction of his net worth. But Delilah found the loophole. Clause 12b. The infidelity clause. Delilah announced, a grim smile on her face as she tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the document. It voids the payout limitations in the event of proven adultery that causes significant public humiliation and brand damage. Your performance at Aurelia wasn't just personal, it was a tactical masterpiece. It triggered this clause beautifully. The first legal volleys were fired. Graham's lawyers, a prestigious firm named Lockwood and Steele, filed a motion to have the infidelity clause thrown out, claiming Maya's actions were a calculated and malicious setup. They demanded a psychological evaluation for her, citing erratic and emotionally volatile behavior. Maya felt a surge of panic, but Delilah was unmoved. "Standard procedure. It's designed to scare you. We counter." They countered with a vengeance. Delilah's team subpoenaed Graham's credit card statements, phone records, and travel logs. They subpoenaed Rhea Collins, forcing her into the legal spotlight she had desperately tried to avoid. They requested financial discovery on a scale that would expose every corner of Graham's empire, from his offshore accounts to his private equity ventures. It was a declaration of total war. The psychological conflict was the hardest part for Maya. At night, alone in the vast, empty bed they once shared, the memories would ambush her. The memory of his proposal on a sailboat in Lake Michigan, the goofy way he'd dance with her in the kitchen, the genuine tears in his eyes when she'd told him she was pregnant. Was that man a complete fabrication? The grief was a physical presence, a weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. He tried to get to her directly. A bouquet of 1,000 white roses, her favorite, arrived with a handwritten note. "Maya, my love, I made a mistake. A stupid, unforgivable mistake. Don't throw away everything we built. I'll do anything. Let's talk." Gee, she read the note, her heart aching with the ghost of what they had been. Then she looked at the mountain of flowers, a grand, empty gesture that cost a fortune but required no real change, no real remorse. She took a photo of the bouquet and sent it to Delilah with a single message. Another exhibit for emotional manipulation. She then had the concierge dispose of the flowers. Graham's partner, a calmer, more grounded man named Elliot Klein, called her. "Maya, I'm not calling to defend him. What he did was indefensible," Elliot said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "But he's unraveling. The board is getting nervous. The press is eating us alive. He's talking about liquidating assets to fight you, moves that could jeopardize the entire company. Is there any way to de-escalate this?" "The only way to de-escalate, Elliot, is for him to sign a fair settlement," Maya replied, her voice firm. "One that secures my future and my child's future, accounting for the damage he has done. He started this war. I'm just fighting back with the weapons he gave me." The power imbalance began to shift in subtle ways. Graham, the man who controlled everything, was losing control. His attempts to intimidate her were being expertly parried by Delilah. His attempts to manipulate her were met with stony silence. The media, which he usually commanded, was painting him as a villain. For the first time, his money wasn't enough. Rhea Collins, stripped of Graham's protection, was crumbling. Deposed by Delilah's team, she was forced to admit the timeline of the affair, the gifts, the trips. Her career at Elridge Enterprises was over, her reputation in tatters. She tried to leverage her position, subtly threatening to release embarrassing details about Graham to the press unless he provided her with a generous severance. Graham, finally seeing her for the transactional opportunist she was, cut her loose completely. Rhea faded from the picture, a casualty of a war she had helped start but was not equipped to fight. One rainy Tuesday, Maya was at her obstetrician's office for a routine checkup. As she lay on the table, listening to the strong, steady thump, thump, thump of her baby's heartbeat through the Doppler, tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed finally came. They weren't tears of sadness for her lost marriage, but tears of overwhelming love and responsibility for the little life that depended entirely on her. This was why she was fighting. Not for revenge, not for money, but for this heartbeat, for the right to build a new life, a safe and stable life, free from the wreckage of Graham's lies. The war of attrition was exhausting, but in that sterile doctor's office, listening to the sound of the future, Maya knew she had the one thing Graham had lost. A reason to win that was bigger than herself, and that made her invincible. The legal battle dragged into a brutal winter. Chicago was entombed in ice, and the cold seemed to seep into the very marrow of the conflict. Graham's strategy was clear: to exhaust Maya financially and emotionally until she accepted his original, paltry settlement offer. His lawyers filed endless, frivolous motions, burying Delilah's team in paperwork, driving up costs, a war of 1,000 paper cuts. Maya felt the strain. The pregnancy was advancing, her body feeling heavy and tired. Some nights, doubt would creep in, whispering that she should just take the deal and find some peace. But then she would feel a kick, a reminder of her purpose, and her resolve would harden again. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Elliot Klein, Graham's business partner, requested a discreet meeting. They met in a quiet cafe in Lincoln Park, far from the prying eyes of the downtown core. Elliot looked haggard, the stress of the company's turmoil etched on his face. "Maya, I shouldn't be here," he began, stirring his coffee without looking at her. "But what Graham is doing, it goes beyond the divorce. It's reckless. He's become paranoid, obsessed. He's making decisions that could sink us all." "What kind of decisions?" Maya asked, her senses on high alert. Elliot hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "He's been trying to leverage company assets for personal use, specifically the new Azure development project. He's trying to structure a loan against the project's capital fund." Maya's mind raced. The Azure was a massive luxury condominium project they had just broken ground on. It was the company's flagship venture. "Why would he do that? He has plenty of personal liquidity." "To hide it," Elliot said, finally meeting her eyes. "He's trying to move money around, to create a smokescreen for the financial discovery your team is doing. He thinks if he can tie up his personal funds in corporate debt, they'll be harder for you to get to. But it's worse than that. The way he's structuring it is verging on fraudulent. He's using projected earnings as collateral, a huge gamble. If the market dips, the whole project could collapse." A cold dread washed over Maya. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. But there was something else in Elliot's eyes, a personal hurt. "There's more, isn't there?" she prodded gently. Elliot sighed, a cloud of defeat. The affair with Rhea Collins. It wasn't just a fling, Maya. It was strategic. Rhea was his point person on a secret side project. They were planning a hostile takeover of my shares. He was using her to gather intel on my other investments, looking for a weakness, a reason to trigger the buyout clause in our partnership agreement. The breath left Maya's body. The betrayal was a hydra, sprouting new, more monstrous heads. Graham hadn't just cheated on his wife, he had been actively plotting to ruin his oldest friend and business partner, the man who had been best man at their wedding. Rhea wasn't just a mistress, she was a co-conspirator. He was going to use the profits from the Azure project, once he controlled it entirely, to build his own dynasty. "Free of me, free of you," Elliot finished, his voice bitter. Maya sat in stunned silence. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Graham's charm, his ambition, she had seen them as his strengths. Now she saw them for what they were. Tools for a deep-seated narcissism, a pathological need to win at any cost, against anyone. He hadn't just broken their vows. His entire character was a lie. He didn't build things. He consumed them. He consumed people. What was in it for her? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. A seat on the new board. A massive equity stake. Power. Rhea didn't want to be your replacement, Maya. She wanted to be him. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She walked through the silent penthouse, a ghost in her own home, replaying 5 years of her life through this new, terrifying lens. Every grand gesture, every shared secret, every promise, it was all tainted, part of a larger, more calculated deception. The pain was immense, but underneath it, a new feeling was born. Leverage. She called Delilah first thing in the morning. Delilah, I have something big. She recounted the entire conversation with Elliot. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Maya feared she had made a mistake. Then, she heard Delilah let out a low, sharp exhale. It was the sound of a predator catching a scent. Maya, Delilah said, her voice electric with intensity. This changes everything. This is no longer about an infidelity clause. This is potential corporate fraud. This is a conspiracy. Elliot Klein is now our star witness. His testimony would not just win your divorce case. It could trigger an SEC investigation. Graham wouldn't just lose half his assets. He could lose his company. He could lose his freedom. The power had shifted completely. Graham thought he was fighting a war of attrition. He had no idea Maya was about to drop a nuclear bomb. Delilah's team moved with lethal precision. They drafted a new settlement proposal. It was no longer a request. It was a demand. They didn't mention Elliot or the takeover plot directly. Instead, they laid out a series of financial demands, so specific and audacious, they could only have come from a place of absolute certainty. They demanded a full 50% of his liquid assets, the title to the penthouse free and clear, a non-negotiable, multi-million-dollar trust fund for the child, and full ownership of a portfolio of private equity investments Maya hadn't even known he had. Investments Elliot had pointed them to. They sent the proposal to Graham's lawyers. The response, for the first time, wasn't an arrogant dismissal. It was silence. A panicked, deafening silence. Graham knew, in that moment, that she knew. He didn't know how, but he knew she had found his secret, the one that could ruin him utterly. His legal maneuvering, his intimidation tactics, his mountains of money, they were all useless now. He was staring into an abyss of his own making. The architect's wife, the quiet, gentle woman he had so casually discarded, had cornered him. And she was about to bring the whole temple down on his head. The silence from Graham's camp lasted for 48 hours. To Maya, it felt like a lifetime. She was in the final weeks of her pregnancy, a state of perpetual discomfort and anticipation that mirrored the legal standoff. Every moment was suspended, waiting for either a kick from her baby or a call from Delilah. The call came on a Thursday afternoon as snow fell in thick, silent blankets over the city. He wants to meet, Delilah said, her voice devoid of triumph, purely professional. Just you and him. No lawyers. He says he will sign whatever you want. But he needs to talk to you first. Maya's first instinct was to refuse. Why should she give him the satisfaction? Why endure one more ounce of his presence? I advise against it, Delilah said immediately. It's a risk. He will try to manipulate you. I know, Maya replied, her hand resting on her stomach. But if I don't do this, if I don't face him one last time, I think it will always be a loose thread. I need to hear it. I need to see it. I'm not the same woman he knew, Delilah. He can't hurt me anymore. She agreed to meet him in the most neutral territory she could think of, the empty penthouse. It was her ground now, but it was filled with the ghosts of their shared life. She wanted him to see what he had lost in the very space he had lost it. He arrived exactly on time. When she opened the door, she was struck by how diminished he looked. The swagger was gone. His expensive suit seemed to hang off him. His face was pale and gaunt, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of money could conceal. He looked broken. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. The furniture was the same, but he was a stranger in it. All the personal photos of them together had been removed, leaving blank spaces on the walls. "Maya," he said, his voice raspy. "Graham," she replied, not moving to let him further into the room. She stood her ground, a queen in her court. He held up the settlement agreement, the one Delilah had sent. It was in his hand, along with a pen. "I'll sign it, all of it. The assets, the penthouse, the trust for the baby. Whatever you want." "I know," she said simply. His face crumpled slightly at her lack of reaction. He had expected relief, maybe even a gloating smile. Her calm unnerved him. "I need to know," he said, his voice cracking. "How did you find out? About Elliot?" "It doesn't matter how," she said. "What matters is that you did it. The affair was cruel, Graham. But plotting to destroy your best friend, the man who stood by you from the beginning? What kind of person does that?" For the first time, he didn't have a slick answer. He looked away, towards the window and the falling snow. "A person who gets so used to winning, they forget what it costs," he whispered. I got lost, Maya. I saw the baby coming, this life, our perfect life, and it felt like a cage. I felt like the walls were closing in. I wanted more. I wanted to prove I was still the guy who could conquer anything. And you saw me and our son as something to be conquered, or something to escape? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Tears welled in his eyes. Real tears. Not the crocodile tears of manipulation, but the scalding tears of genuine regret. To escape, he admitted, the confession seeming to shatter something inside him. I was a coward. I was so terrified of failing as a husband and a father that I decided to burn the whole thing down first. It was monstrous. I know that now. He looked at her, his gaze pleading. And Rhea, she wasn't a temptation. She was a reflection. She was as hungry and as empty as I was. It was never about her. It was always about me, my ego, my fear. Maya listened, feeling the final vestiges of her old love for him, turning to ash. It wasn't anger anymore. It was a profound, hollow pity. He wasn't a titan. He was just a small, scared man who had built a skyscraper around his own emptiness. I believe you, she said, and she meant it. She believed he was sorry now that he was cornered, now that he had lost everything. The reckoning had come for him. But it doesn't change anything. I know, he choked out. He stepped forward and placed the signed papers and the pen on the console table by the door. Can I ask you one thing? She nodded. The baby, our son. Will you tell him about me? Will you let me? His voice broke. Will you let me try to be a father to him? This was the question she had been dreading and preparing for. She thought of the innocent life inside her, a life that deserved a father, even a flawed one. Her battle had been with Graham the husband, not Graham the father. That was a battle he would have to fight for himself, every day, for the rest of his life. He will know who his father is, she said, her voice softening for the first time. And whether you get to be a father to him will be up to you. It will be decided by your actions From this day forward. You will have to earn him, Graham. Every single day. He nodded, wiping his eyes. A man stripped bare of all his power. There was nothing left to say. The war was over. He had signed his surrender. He turned and walked out the door, not looking back. Maya closed it behind him, the quiet click of the lock sealing the end of an era. She stood in the silent hall, her hand on her belly, and took a deep, shuddering breath. It was the first breath of her new life, a life she had fought for, a life that was finally, unequivocally, her own. 3 weeks later, on a crisp, sunlit morning that promised the first thaw of spring, Noah Elias Elridge was born. He arrived with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair, a perfect, tiny being, untainted by the storm he had weathered in utero. Holding him in her arms for the first time, Maya felt a love so pure and powerful it recalibrated her entire world. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the anger of the past few months dissolved in the face of this miracle. This was her victory. This was her redemption. The divorce was finalized quietly. True to his word, Graham didn't contest a single point. The penthouse became hers. The funds were transferred. The trust for Noah was established. The media moved on to the next scandal. The tremor had subsided. Graham kept his distance in the beginning, respecting her need for space. The first time he saw his son was a week after Maya brought him home. He didn't come with grand gifts or empty promises. He came alone, looking nervous and humbled. He stood by the crib and just looked at Noah, his face a complex mask of awe, regret, and a fragile, nascent love. "He's beautiful, Maya," he whispered. "He looks like you. He has your eyes," she replied softly. It was a simple statement of fact, not an olive branch, but a recognition of their unbreakable link. Their interactions became a carefully choreographed dance of co-parenting. They communicated through a shared app, discussing feeding schedules, doctor's appointments, and milestones. Graham was consistent. He showed up when he said he would. He learned how to change a diaper, how to soothe Noah's crying, how to be present in the small, unglamorous moments of fatherhood. He was also a man in ruins. The near collapse of his company, coupled with the public disgrace, had forced him into a self-imposed exile. He sold his majority stake in Elridge Enterprises to Elliot Klein, who, with a steady hand, began to rebuild what Graham had almost destroyed. Graham enrolled in therapy, something the old version of himself would have scoffed at. He was doing the work, not to win Maya back, but to rebuild himself from the foundation up. His redemption wasn't a dramatic event. It was a quiet, daily effort. As for Maya, she thrived. The penthouse, once a symbol of her gilded cage, became a sanctuary of light and laughter. She filled the blank spaces on the walls with photos of Noah, with abstract art she loved, with blueprints of her own designs. With the financial security she had fought for, she opened her own boutique architecture firm, Elridge and Associates, keeping the name not for him, but for her son. She started small, taking on projects she was passionate about, a community library, a sustainable housing project. Her creativity, so long dormant, bloomed with ferocious intensity. She was no longer just a mother or an ex-wife. She was Maya, the architect. One sunny afternoon, about a year later, she was in Millennium Park with Noah, watching him take wobbly first steps on the grass near the Pritzker Pavilion. Graham was there, sitting a respectful distance away on a bench. They were meeting for the custody exchange. It was comfortable, practiced. He walked over, a small, genuine smile on his face. "He's getting fast. Tell me about it," Maya laughed, scooping a giggling Noah into her arms. They stood there for a moment in a comfortable silence. Two people forever bound by the child between them, but no longer by the wreckage of their past. They were not friends, not enemies, just co-parents, architects of a new, separate but connected reality for their son. "You're doing a great job, Maya," Graham said quietly, his eyes on Noah. "With him. With the firm. I saw your feature in Architectural Digest. It's amazing." "Thank you, Graham," she replied, and the gratitude was real. "You're doing good too." He had earned that much. He had shown up. He was trying, as he took a happy, babbling Noah from her arms, their hands brushed. There was no spark, no ghost of a thrill, just the simple, mundane reality of two people sharing a responsibility. He had once been the center of her universe, a sun god in a bespoke suit. Now, he was just Noah's dad. She watched them walk away, Graham pointing out the silvery curves of the band shell to their son. Maya turned her face to the sun, feeling its warmth. She had not only survived, she had been reborn. She had walked through fire and emerged not scarred, but forged. She had lost a husband, but had found herself. And in the quiet, steady rhythm of her own heart, she knew she had built a life far more valuable and far more real than the one she had lost. A life built not on a fragile illusion of perfection, but on the unshakable foundation of her own strength. Maya's story is a powerful reminder that our deepest betrayals can often lead to our greatest transformations. She didn't just get divorced. She reclaimed her power, her identity, and her future. It shows that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. What did you think of her journey? Was Graham's redemption believable? Could you have been as calculated as Maya in that moment? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Every story has many sides, and your perspective makes our community richer. If this story of resilience, betrayal, and rebirth resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. Thank you for watching.